or just a randomized sequence of events and we happen to be the end product of it. So far, 1,000,000 years from now, what will humans look like if we're still around? Who knows? Hey folks, welcome to the channel, Thinking Theology. I'm Don. Today I've got one. I haven't seen this one. I was just scouting the net for some videos to react to on the channel, which is what I do. I react to them. I generally have not seen any of the things that I'm looking at. Then I just assess the arguments being made. I don't care if somebody's an atheist, a fundamentalist, or whatever. I'm still going to look at the arguments being made. Sometimes the premises they're employing to construct their arguments don't work for me, whatever. I'll make a comment. And sometimes the argument is sound, might be invalid, philosophically or logically speaking. But Richard Dawkins, One Fact to Refute Creationism. Should be interesting to see what he comes up with on this fact. How long? 2.5 minutes, so it's fairly short. Let's see what he says. It's a long fact if it's 2.5 minutes long, but let's see what the fact is that he says.
Do you think there could be one sentence that could convince, let's say, a creationist to seriously doubt their theory? Ideally, if you could convince a believer in God to really doubt their belief, but that's too hard.
Not sure about a sentence. I think perhaps the single most convincing fact, the observation that you could point to would be the pattern of resemblances that you see when you compare the genes using modern DNA techniques, actually looking at the letter-to-letter correspondences between genes. Compare the genes of any pair of animals you like, pair of animals, pair of plants, and then plot out the resemblances, and they fall in a perfect hierarchy, a perfect family tree. And the only alternative to it being a family tree is that the intelligent designer deliberately set out to deceive us in the most underhand and devious manner. Moreover, the same thing works with every gene you do separately, and even pseudogenes that don't do anything but are vestigial relics of genes that once did something.
So is he saying that the hierarchy itself proves creation, or is the best observation that might refute a creationist position or belief in God? But why is he saying underhanded? Maybe I missed it. Maybe he clears it up.
I find it extremely hard to imagine how any creationist who actually bothered to listen to that could possibly doubt the fact of evolution. But they don't listen. I mean, your question is a perfectly good question, but it's not really relevant, because what they do is simply stick their fingers in their ear and say la la la. They know what's true because it's in the Holy Book. And that even, I mean, the most extreme case is the geologist Kurt Wise, who has a PhD in geology from Harvard, and said, if all the evidence in the universe pointed towards an old Earth, I would be the first to admit it, but I would still be a young Earth creationist, because that is what Holy Scripture teaches me. You cannot argue with a mind like that. A mind like that, it seems to me, is, well, a disgrace to the human species.
I think that's very much overreaching. Even though in some ways I agree with him on it, that is not my approach toward other people and their beliefs. If somebody is a dick, it doesn't matter if I agree with them or disagree with them. I don't like being around them if they're crass. And I'm not saying he is that. I'm saying this approach is what prevents the useful dialogue from taking place. On the other hand, he's been called tons of names by the other side as well. And so once the battle begins, it's on, and your mindset, you might decide to go in a certain direction. And it's what I said in the beginning. It's just a difference in premises that people use. Some people will use he's an evolutionary biologist that used DNA. CGTA, I think he was referring to, and the genomes and such. What is it? Cytosine, guanine, thymine, and adenine. He said a hierarchy. I don't know if he meant an evolutionary development Probably not, because he's pretty careful with his words, very specific with his words. Was he speaking of looking at earlier life forms, testing the DNA, things that are theorized or a million years old or millions of years old, and you know, they found like algae and other types of things frozen in ice that's also you know, polar ice that could be tens of millions of years old, and then they can analyze those and say, see, this is the precursor to this life form, which then became this and this and this. Now, evolutionarily speaking, on up to human beings, I'm not fully sure what it was there that he was saying, but his premises are, let's look at the biological evidence and other such things, whereas the gentleman he's referring to that's a disgrace was a Harvard biologist. He said all the scientific evidence could point to this old Earth, but because the texts say young Earth, the gentleman from Harvard was going to lean toward or believe that it's a young Earth and try to get, you know, be more patient, if you will, to see if all the scientific evidence, the observable evidence, will support a young Earth. Different premises, different bases of worldview. And I'm not quite sure if there's a way around the contentiousness. Basically, people just have to stop being jackasses to one another about it. But then you get the school systems in play. And once you get people's children involved, like, are teachers allowed to even mention God on any level in a public school, in any context? One nation, under God, indivisible. Are you allowed to say that? Is that the establishment of a religion? Or is it acceptable because it's in the common vernacular to say it? Over 90% of people worldwide believe in a higher power of some sort. It's not necessarily God or Jesus or the Mosaic Law. It's not necessarily that. Buddhists and pantheists and such believe in some kind of divine power. So given that, is it that people should never, in America, for example, mention God in the public school systems? Well, if you're a hardcore atheist, you believe absolutely that should not take place. Enter the world of fighting with one another. Because there are people who are wonderful, kind people who go through their life. They believe in God, and that's fine. You know, I don't know what the person in the car next to me believes, and I don't care when I'm going down the highway. I don't care if somebody believes or doesn't believe in God when I'm talking with them. Does not faze me. What I care is, are you at least considerate enough of other views? You don't have to accept them, but can you hear them? And that is part of Dawkins' problem, I guess, with the gentleman and others who are avowed creationists, that it doesn't matter what you present. They will not open their minds wide enough to consider it. Dawkins himself, he has studied Scripture. So I give him, and people like him in this regard, and I guess I have to put myself in that fold, where he has considered extensively what the texts say. And he says the texts just don't work. They don't. There's brutality, there's contradiction, you know, his view, and then some. So I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, when you strip down the name calling that people employ, and all sides do it, whether it's politics or religion or sports, it doesn't matter. There's name calling that takes place in it, that once you remove all that, you can actually consider the argument that he made. And then it's worth looking at that to see if the ACGT and the genomes and all these things, if they point to a pure creationist perspective or just a randomized sequence of events and we happen to be the end product of it. So far, a million years from now, what will humans look like if we're still around? Who knows? Anyway, all right, guys, leave your thoughts. We'll see where it goes. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video and keep thinking theology.